Hello, welcome to this video. Thank you so much for tuning in, sharing in this now moment with myself and with one another. If you haven't seen these videos before, welcome back. If you have, my intention is unity and oneness and the highest levels of love light. This video is going to be about vertigo, essentially. Vertigo, dizziness, lightheadedness, and some of the effects that we're seeing on the human body because of all the earth changes that we are experiencing. So I'm going to go a little bit into the science behind vertigo, as well as the synchronicities that I've experienced in relationship to vertigo, and kind of move into a place of understanding that we are all going through a major shift. And this major shift is creating this feeling of imbalance, not only within our nervous system, within our literal organs, especially our sensory organs, from what I've been channeling and tuning into, but also how to kind of balance that out. In addition to that, I will share a channeling at the end of this video or potentially the next video where I tune into my higher consciousness team and share the messages that come through. And basically I'm tuning into the bank of the universal bank of information that we all have access to. Some might call it the Akashic Records. Others might call it universal consciousness. I call it my higher guidance team, whatever we want to refer to as that. So without further ado, whenever I have 4, 5, 6 different circumstances or sessions where there are multiple examples of physical things physically that somebody's experiencing, or similar questions, 4 or 5 people are asking me the same question or having similar experiences in their life, I like to share it with the collective. I like to share it with you guys because it's relevant for more than just them, most likely. So thank you for everyone who has done a session with me and has shared these experiences, because it helps everybody, not just the person I'm working with. So thank you. My experience has also, over the years, brought me through vertigo and feelings of dizziness and lightheadedness. So my intention is to share some of the solutions that I have found, not only in my own experience, some of the things I've read about. And I always would like to share, none of this is medical advice. It's merely a perspective based on my own journey. So every body is different, and how every body experiences this will be different. So just recognizing that, I think, is very important. I want to just give a quick overview of what all of this looks like. So I like to bridge the science and the woo-woo, or the science and some of the esoteric that really is science, but I share from my own intuition. And so one of the things that I want to talk about is we are going through what many people would call ascension. And as we are going through ascension, so I'm going to speak about this as if you know what it is, but I'll share some of the things, little things, as if you've never watched this video before. So a little bit of both. Ascension, for those who know, I'm not going to go into too much detail. I like to refer to as expansion, DNA upgrading, activation, growth, and all of those things I think would be appropriate. Moving into higher dimensions, increasing our vibration, increasing our frequency. And a lot of the words I use interchangeably. I realize that there are compartmentalizations for these words, but that's not what I choose to do. I like to kind of merge it all together. So the most common reason that people are experiencing vertigo is because the inner ear crystals have shifted their where they are, their location, or they feel like they've shifted location. Our inner ears give us the ability to sense gravity. So I just want to kind of give an overview. Our body is going through upgrades from my perspective. Everything is shared from my perspective. I see us as expanding and contracting. I see us as being intrinsically connected to the earth. And as we grow, so too do we experience growing pains, AKA ascension symptoms, or discomfort, or things that we might interpret as painful or uncomfortable. But in actuality, it's just part of our process of upgrading. Sometimes when we reset our system, There are things that happen that we might refer to as symptoms. And again, these are not necessarily a condition, they just might be a temporary thing that we are going through, feeling a sensation, awareness, so on and so forth. And one of the things that my guides have been talking about for a few months now, over and over again, are the changes in the body. Pay attention to the body. Many of you have been tuning into these types of teachings or sharings, have been hearing about embodiment and all of that. So everything is connected. While we are going through these upgrades, while we are activating, while our extrasensory abilities are feeling heightened, the earth is also going through this as well. And that's something else I'll be talking about later on. So some of us are feeling ultra sensitive in our ears. That's kind of where we're going to focus today. We might be feeling really sensitive to sound. That's been happening a lot. Vertigo, dizziness, feelings of lightheadedness, being off balance. These have all been things that have been brought into my reality, again, through other light workers, humans, starseeds sharing with me what's happening in their lives. I too have experienced this. Most recently, mine has been primarily lightheadedness, not necessarily dizziness. But I experienced extreme cases of vertigo back in 2010 and 2011. And I'll share the first suggestion, or let me just go backwards. The first thing that I did was I went and saw a doctor. I did. You know, when you go online and you have something wrong and you look it up and you go, oh, wow, you have a symptom, you think something's wrong. You look online and you get all this proof as to why something's wrong. And you think oh no, I'm going to have to go to the hospital. Something's really wrong with me. Well, I did that. Been there, done that. Hopefully this will help prevent you guys from doing that as well. So I was experiencing these symptoms. I went through the whole process, all the tests that you could get, seeing the neurologist, going to get MRIs, getting CAT scans done, going back to see the doctor. And I call them ascension symptoms, which I've now referred to as upgrades, or what I just said is growing pains. I didn't realize at the time that my body was changing. Simultaneously, as my body was going through these upgrades, I was becoming more intuitive. I was becoming more sensitive to feelings that I was experiencing during energy healing. I was receiving messages and downloads from the universe, or uploads from the earth, whatever we want to call it. So all of that was turning on for me, while simultaneously my body was making the appropriate adjustments to support that. And that, in a nutshell, is what I feel is happening for many of us. Now, we could also look at it as our bodies are evolving. We are changing as we do. We are evolving or moving from one version of reality, from one dimension, from one vibrational frequency, from one density into another. And that requires adjustments to happen. This is not only happening in our bodies, it's happening in the body of Earth. So as these adjustments happen, we feel different than we did before. And this is why many of the messages that have been coming on are pay attention to how you feel, because you may not be able to do the same things that you were doing before. This doesn't mean it's permanent. My guidance team continually says this is not permanent. The changes can be permanent, but how we feel about them will shift. It potentially could become much easier. It can be very uncomfortable for a period of time as these adjustments occur. And then as we start to integrate and acclimate, just like a scuba diver, right? We begin to feel a little bit better. It becomes easier. Could be because we become used to it. It becomes normal for us, or it just starts to decrease as we evolve. So I'm just kind of putting those compartmentalizational definitions into one big soup. So the first thing with the vertigo is it can be very disruptive. And so sometimes by going to a doctor, and so I'm just going to kind of go through very short list of causes and solutions. And then we'll go into, if I don't know if I already said this, but then we'll go into some of the synchronicities and quantum pieces that I've felt or tuned into, as well as the channeling will be at the end or in a separate video. So this might be a series of videos. So as I went down this rabbit hole, I found that there was so much information on it, and it was so fascinating to actually look at our inner ear and how it works. We have over 1,000 crystals in each ear. Isn't that crazy? And that's just really cool. They're teeny, 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 tiny, right? So they help us balance and orient ourselves, right? We are then orienting to our environment and gravity. And the way that it was described was it's orientating, sometimes I just make up my own words, ourselves to linear acceleration. So just as a kind of overview, that we'll get into a little bit more deeply as well, because from my perspective, how we are interacting with time has shifted. That means how we are interacting with gravity, or the spin ratio, or our spin has accelerated. So just from a very esoteric perspective or intuitive perspective, our bodies are also going to shift to balance that out, right? Play on words, pun intended. We're here to balance. We're balancing our relationship with our bodies, and we're balancing our relationship with Earth and our bodies are balancing our relationship with gravity and time, because things have sped up from a broader perspective. Now, a very basic definition is the crystals in the ears get jumbled around. So there are simple solutions for this. Look it up. Go see a doctor. You can see a physical therapist. There are exercises you can look up online. And I wrote a few of them down: the Earthbody maneuver, the Hall-Pike maneuver, and the Canalith reposition. So those are 3 things that you might find helpful, where you turn the head a certain way while you're laying down, and you help to reshift. You do these exercises to help get you in balance. And they do work, by the way. I've had clients that have done them, and I've done them, and they do work. They do help. Will it permanently fix it? I don't know. I don't really know. What do we know, right? What we think we know is kind of going out the window. From my perspective, there will be more and more bouts of vertigo, dizziness, and lightheadedness. And really, there are so many reasons this could be. So I'm going to go over the short list, and if you guys feel called, you could look up the long list. But from a very broad perspective, this will get better, but it could get worse before it gets better, just like everything else. So the crystals moving around in the ears is the biggest cause of this. So we might find ourselves needing to do those exercises to bring them back into alignment. The second thing that I noticed, and I'll give the list of all the things that can affect it, is sometimes if we're on medication, there's certain medications, anti-anxiety, depression, cardiovascular. So I would say that covers a huge amount of our population. So if anybody's on these types of medications, and let's say, now I want to be very careful here, because what it was said online is if we take too much of it, it can create vertigo. But if the body is shifting and changing, what we thought wasn't too much before could be too much now. And that's just something to be aware of, and something you might want to talk with your doctor about if you fall in that category. I'll start with alcohol, for example. There's a lot of people that I've been working with who can't drink. Friends I have that are unable to drink alcohol, that used to be able to drink alcohol, sometimes large quantities of alcohol. We could argue that it's the liver and the metabolism, but alcohol, caffeine, and salt have also been shown to stimulate certain conditions that can then create the symptoms of vertigo. So that's something to keep in mind. And that's kind of a common sense thing, but I really wanted to touch on that because sometimes we keep up old habits because it's a habit. And we aren't necessarily paying attention to our bodies to recognize that it no longer is something we can support because it no longer supports where we're going, what we're evolving into. What we now need is different than what we needed before. And again, I could do a whole separate video on the ascension and what that looks like and what that means. But we'll start with the basics, keep it simple, star seeds to begin with. So reducing our intake of any of those things might be good. Ironically, though, dehydration can also lead to dizziness and enhance a lot of the conditions that have the symptom of vertigo and dizziness. So dehydration, now let's talk about that briefly. Caffeine, alcohol, and salt can all dehydrate the body. So being aware of the types of salt that we're putting in our bodies, I use pink Himalayan, sometimes I use sea salt. There's all kinds of salts and they all have different properties that, or minerals within them that can be beneficial for the body. We need to know what our body needs. Know thy body, know thyself, because some people need more salt than others. If you have low blood pressure, your salt intake is going to be very different than someone who has high blood pressure. So maybe getting a physical workup to know where you're at, getting some blood work done, seeing an allergist, seeing a nutritionist, now is the time to do it. Because as our bodies shift, as the earth shifts, and I'm going to be talking about the earth changes affecting our body, we're going to have these things happen. Again, I call them ascension symptoms back in 2010 or 2011. Now I just call them physical upgrades. So finding maybe a substitute for those things may be something we need to do. It might be temporary. I find that most of the time with alcohol and caffeine, it's more habitual. The caffeine is a stimulant and the alcohol is a depressant. Now I'm leading into that because what they've found is that, again, antidepressants, certain things because of depression and anxiety can bring on dizziness or vertigo. So if we're drinking alcohol and we're depressed, which we shouldn't be on medication if we're drinking alcohol anyways, but that's a whole other topic, right? That is a sign. So if we're depressed, maybe alcohol isn't necessarily something we should be putting into our bodies because we're not processing it. Our brain, it's affecting our brain, it's affecting our hormones, so on and so forth. In addition to that, if we have cardiovascular issues, we need to be looking at our salt and caffeine and alcohol too, because all of those can cause heart palpitations, so on and so forth. So these are all just things to know, just to be aware of. I only know this because I have experienced all of this. I loved when I was younger to drink alcohol. I still drink coffee. However, I'm down to 1 cup, not even every day. And I go through periods of time where I get rid of it entirely. I love salt. So I've had to kind of make these adjustments, and I will share back in 2011, I didn't just decide to make these adjustments. My body decided for me. My body went through such a series of symptoms that I had no choice but to listen to it. I mean, I could have resisted it, and I did, but that just made it worse. So letting go of the resistance and recognizing that sometimes we're just hanging on to old habits, that we may not feel good anymore when we participate in these old habit patterns, certain foods, certain drinks, so on and so forth. And so recognizing that that can stimulate vertigo is really important right now. And in the caffeine world, we can do decaffeinated. We can wean ourselves off of it. We can take breaks, so on and so forth. I got so sick that I just cut everything out because I didn't know what was wrong. And after going through all of the steps to find out what was wrong with me, to just discover that I was perfectly healthy, it gave me the opportunity to learn a lot, to cleanse my body and to detoxify, and to recognize then from that point forward certain things that I put into my body that my body no longer wanted. Let's face it, our metabolism changes as we get older. Certain things shift in our bodies. We may have conditions that we need to support that we didn't have before, so on and so forth. So getting out of that resistance and being stubborn is really important. So for me, I've shifted my diet frequently to try to balance everything out. Going to hydration. Now, water, and I want to talk and tie this in with changes in the earth. When we have a full moon, many of us know already it affects our body. And affects our it affects everything. The number of car accidents go up, the number of births go up, the number of hospitalizations increases, so on and so forth. It affects our tides. Our body is 70% water. So it would only make sense that other things happening in the earth or with the sun might also affect us. So I have spoken a lot about solar activity. Briefly, our solar activity has increased. Our sun is becoming more active. Therefore, we are affected by that. The plasma, the radiation, the sun affects our the magnetics of the earth. It affects our energy levels. Ironically, we need the sun for vitamins, for vitamin D, and for energy. Yet at the same time, that sun is increasing, so our relationship with the sun is changing as well. The relationship to the earth with the sun is changing. So we, from my perspective, are making the appropriate adjustments through evolution in order to be able to balance this out. So we need to support that as well, recognizing that it can make us feel more thirsty. We can feel more dehydrated. So if we are maintaining the same habits of drinking and eating salt and caffeine, yet we're not taking in more water to balance that out, and we've got this increased solar activity and increased changes in our body, we're going to have some side effects. Dizziness might be one of them, lightheadedness, and vertigo, especially if we have a heart condition or we're taking medication. I mean, you see how this is all connected. Some of this is common sense, but you'd be surprised. A lot of this is we tend to forget about. So I hope this is kind of making sense for those of you who may not have even thought about it. So when we drinking our water, quality of water is very important. How often we drink the water, and recognizing, following that, when we're thirsty, drink water before we're thirsty. Also to help flush these things out of our system, because our body is going through kind of a detoxification, which I've talked about before. So many people so the salt goes with the food. What kind of foods are we putting in our bodies? Many people are fasting. And so I'm a big supporter of fasting. I think it can reset your whole system, yet it needs to be done the right way. So I encourage everyone to look up, just like I'm encouraging everyone to get your numbers checked and follow your due diligence to see what your body needs, whether that means going to a holistic doctor or a traditional doctor or just a nutritionist is up to you. But at least knowing what would be helpful is helpful, right? So fasting is amazing, but if we're not doing it the right way, we can actually be harming our body and not helping it. Apparently, women's bodies are different than men's bodies. How we go through this fast is extremely important. So if we're fasting, but we're not hydrating enough, it's going to have a detrimental effect on our entire system. And this can actually increase our dizziness and vertigo and lightheadedness as well. So being aware of that is important. So the numbers on the vertigo, I mean, I have these 5 clients that all experienced it. That doesn't mean they're all experiencing it for the same reasons. However, it could be a combination of all of these things. And it could just be that they're very sensitive to the changes that are happening in the earth. If our crystals, we have crystals in our body, and I'm going to repeat this. If I didn't say it, I'm going to say it first. I just can't remember because I've done so many videos recently that I had to redo. Whew. So our inner ears have, each ear has 1,000 crystals, right? Think about when we are vibrating. So many of us are experiencing shakiness, heart palpitations. We're feeling like, what is happening? Our bodies are vibrating. And this vibrates everything, the crystals in the body. Look up cymatics if you haven't already. I encourage you to do that. Dr. Emoto's water experiments, looking at vibration and sound, because this could be a completely separate video on vertigo. But if we are vibrating, then we're going to feel that in the body. If the earth is shaking, which it is, we've had earthquakes, we've had fires, we've had floods, we've had mudslides, and this is continuing as the earth changes, we're changing also. So if we're experiencing that in our bodies and the earth is experiencing it in her body, and we are electrically, our heart's electrical, our brain synapses are electrical, the earth is electrical, right? We have all of this intrinsic connection. It would only make sense that the earth, if there's an earthquake, the crystals in the earth are moving around too. So we may very well be feeling that as well. So I know I'm going a little bit esoteric here, but I think it's important to really kind of pull these all together and recognize it can be all of these things. It's important for us to recognize that. And grounding, if you haven't seen the movie Grounding, I encourage you and invite you to watch that. There's science behind grounding. If we are dizzy, oftentimes we need to get our feet on the ground, connect our grounding wire. Why do you think they have grounding wires? We are the same thing. We're conduits, right? Our body is exchanging with the earth, and we are affected by the gravitational pull of the earth. We're affected by the tides in our body, our water. So when we tune back into the earth and we get our feet barefoot on the ground, it helps get us centered. It may not cure our vertigo, but it can certainly help us find our center and spatial awareness. Because one of the definitions of vertigo is our awareness of linear acceleration. And so that's valuable to look at too. So if we think about time, right? Again, we feel like time is speeding up. Everything is getting faster. So now we have this linear acceleration that we're trying to kind of figure out. I'm seeing figure 8, getting into alignment with, so that we can rebalance and find our center of gravity, which is part of what our inner ears and the crystals in our inner ears actually do. So those are all just some basic things. I think I covered, let's talk about the immune system. One of the other things that they say can cause, this is a theory, and I want to talk a little bit about viruses. And that word in itself, I can already hear people cringing or feel people cringing. It is what it is, right? We're surrounded by viruses. Viruses are connected to actually the DNA and RNA. So from one perspective, let's go esoteric, also science. If our DNA is evolving, if we are accelerating, if we are activating more strands of our DNA, then there's a potential that certain we know what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, right? There's a potential that certain viral things are going to show up that we may be needing to go through in order to increase our resistance to them. So evolution, right? How do we, if we have viruses, and let's pretend for a moment, because it's a belief that vertigo could be caused by a virus. Now, we know for a fact that just because someone has symptoms that are sick doesn't mean they have the flu. Even if they have flu-like symptoms, they might get tested and they don't have the flu. They just have those symptoms. So just because someone has vertigo and let's say they believe it's caused by a virus, that doesn't mean that's what causes it in everyone. So it's different for everybody, and that's really important to recognize, because as we've learned with the most recent viruses, and that will remain nameless, it affects everyone differently. And sometimes a person has it and has the symptoms, other person has the symptoms and doesn't have it. So recognizing that, what is a virus caused by and how do we fight it? Well, we boost our immune system. It says so right on the government website. Not that just because it's on there means it's real, but it's helpful to understand that in order to increase our immune system, we boost our immune system, it helps to keep away viruses. So why not do it? If this is potentially, and it is a belief that some types of vertigo could be caused by a virus, which I find fascinating. But theoretically, if a virus is caused by a lowered immune system, then we just increase our immune system and we'll be able to balance it out or get rid of it faster. Because oftentimes they say with a virus, you just have to let it ride out, right? So there are certain medications in theory that might be able to help vertigo, but all those medications are doing if they believe, and that is what they say, that it's a belief, not a fact. Then it would be a belief that that medication is helping, but it wouldn't be a fact either. Therefore, if we're trying to go for a more holistic approach, it would only make sense that we do things to increase our boost our immune system. How do we do that? Google it, look it up. But for me, I love using zinc. I love using green tea with plenty of antioxidants. I love using vitamin C. Vitamin D in the sun is very important. Maybe going out during certain times of the day versus the middle of the day when the sun is at its strongest. I like oil of oregano and rosemary. But again, it's nice to know what you may or may not be allergic to and what your body may have more of and less of. It's always helpful to have that information. And in this case, knowledge is power. And what I was shown is when we know about how the body works, that knowledge gives us an edge because we can recognize, oh, maybe that's what I'm feeling right now. Okay. And this is important anyways, because we are all experiencing really increased, I talked about this in a previous video called sensory overload. We're just being bombarded. And so we have all of this, I'll just say this. We have, our ears are, okay, I'm gonna go here because I think it's important. A lot of us just feel depleted. You know, we feel like we're run down and we're not really sure why. So if we are having bouts of vertigo, by the way, we can feel tired afterwards. We're feeling off balance. We've got a lot of chaos going around us. We've got fires, we've got floods, we've got, you know, everything. So we're going to be feeling the ripple effect from that. So that kind of covers, I'm looking at a whiteboard. I have all these notes that I took because I was trying to keep myself on track because when I went down this rabbit hole, it took me into so many different avenues, which I found very fascinating. I kind of nerded out on it. So I think I already mentioned the maneuvers to do. You can look those up. I'll share the links, but you can look up exercises. So we'll just review it. Hydration. So cranial sacral therapy. Balancing out the body, the cranial sacral fluid is important. That can help potentially with the vertigo. Drinking plenty of water, not overdoing the alcohol, caffeine, or salt. Rooting and grounding with the earth, getting those wires connected, that is literally going to allow the body, the electrical body, to balance more. What else? and regulating the nervous system. So sometimes if the one of the other things, so I'm going to go through briefly some compartmentalizations of what can cause vertigo, but the reason I'm doing it is because it's just interesting to show how everything is connected to this inner ears. And it's not just one organ. I just channeled this this morning about the brain and how our body is communicating always to us. We are in our body, our soul, let's say our light is encased within this particular vessel. And we have a tendency to separate. We have a tendency to compartmentalize our organs, our heart. We go to a heart doctor, our ears, nose, and throat, our stomach. But what I keep being shown is, remember, it's a vessel. It's an organism. It's not an organ. Well, the whole body is an organ. The skin is an organ that holds all of our other individual organs, but they don't function without each other very well. And the inner ears are the same. So our whole body is made up of crystals. Think of what's made up in the earth. Our whole body is made up of water. Think about what's in the earth. Our whole body is electrical. Think of the heart and the neurons in the brain, right? Think about the blood and the rivers on the earth and the oil that's in underneath the earth and the cerebral spinal fluid in the body. I mean, it's just really, really fascinating. And for those who think that the earth is just a planet, it is a living entity. And if you need proof, well, stick a seed in the dirt. I mean, we're kind of at that stage where for us to believe that Earth isn't a living entity is the ultimate separation, the ultimate compartmentalization, and the ultimate disconnect of logic and analyzation with the right brain. So we're kind of synchronizing our brain hemispheres right now. And think about the ears. We're resyncing everything. It's all connected in order to fine tune, which reminds me of the little hairs, our instrument. How do you play a musical instrument? There's strings. What do the hairs in the ears do? How do they operate with acoustics? And so maybe we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So let's break down a couple things that I found really fascinating briefly. And before I share screen, I'm going to share a whole list of links to articles that you might find interesting and to kind of review on your own. I like to look and see where my synchronicities line up, and I'll share those in a minute. And I didn't really get to heart math. So a lot of this is about us regulating our nervous system. I mentioned syncing up the brain hemispheres. There is such an increase in anxiety. Sometimes vertigo is an actual, can be, the symptoms of vertigo can be caused by antidepressants, right? Being on cardiovascular medication, all of that. And so it's important to recognize that if we can prevent this, or we can balance it out, it's not only going to help our vertigo or feeling dizzy and lightheaded, it's going to help everything. So really stabilizing our nervous system, balancing our vagus nerve, getting into our heart is important, because getting into our heart isn't just about us feeling love and light. Why do we want to feel love and light? Why do we want to feel bliss? Because that hydrates the entire nervous system. So we then balance everything out so it's operating at its optimum, right? Optimum. I keep feeling optical, optimum, optic, otic, autoimmune. I mean, there's so many different ways that we could play with this. So if we can do heart math, I encourage you to look up heartmath.org. I have meditations that I do with clients to help drop them into a space of calm, centeredness, breath work. All of these things are important because we're going to be going through changes. It's not necessarily just, this is it. It's an ongoing evolution. It's ongoing ascension. This is a journey. It isn't just a one-time thing for a lot of us. We're going to be experiencing this in waves. We'll be experiencing this from time to time based on what's happening in the inner earth. Okay, so I talked a little bit about, I'm trying to decide where I want to start because there's so many places. I want to talk a little bit about the synchronicities. And let's start off by, I'm just going to share screen and we'll go into otolith or otolith. I apologize, I'm probably not pronouncing it right, but I'm just going to share screen. And I'm on Wikipedia. And so here we are on, let me zoom up, otolith. So this is talking about the crystals that are in the inner ears, and the whole thing is just fascinating. But these organs are what allows an organism, including humans, to perceive linear acceleration, both horizontally and vertically, gravity. They have been identified in extinct and extant vertebrates. I love the fact, I just thought it was funny because counting the annual growth rings on the otoliths is a common technique in estimating the age of fish. Hello, trees, fish, again, just showing how intrinsically everything is connected. We are not separate from these animals or from the earth. I loved the vestibular labyrinth. If you look up, I mean, to me, this reminds me of the heart a little bit, just that section. And I just thought this was I really feel like we need to dip into this briefly. So let's play. So bony labyrinth. So if you've watched my videos before, you know I really like to follow synchronicities. And the labyrinth to me is a huge synchronicity. It was, not to mention, one of my favorite childhood movies. I know. So the bony labyrinth is the rigid bony outer wall of the inner ear in the temporal bone. It consists of 3 parts. So there's canals, it is the bony outer wall. So it's a bone. And what is a bone? A bone is made up, it's a crystal matrix. And it's sound, it has to do with acoustics. And look at that shape. It's just incredible to really see what it looks like. I mean, it looks like a sea creature, doesn't it? It looks like a heart. And if I go back here, we're going to talk about gravity. So it talks a little bit about higher aquatic and terrestrial vertebrates, which I thought was interesting. They are sensitive to gravity and linear acceleration. And so because of their orientation in the head, the utricle is sensitive to change in horizontal movement, and the saccule gives information about vertical acceleration. Well, we're that being, right? So we know when we're in an elevator, we can sense it. And so this is important to recognize. So what is gravity? Whoa, I love that picture. Weight. It's a fundamental interaction which causes mutual attraction between all things that have mass. Whew. So for me, it's rate of spin. Okay, so we're going to go woo-woo for a moment, which is also scientific, but it's just my own version of what I see. And the messages I've received is that time is sped up, we've accelerated, how it is that we perceive things has gotten faster, and that's literal as well as figurative. We think faster, we're integrating things faster, we're working through things faster, while simultaneously we feel like things have sped up. Like, wow, where did that week go? Where did that day go? Most of the time. Sometimes time seems like it's slower, but I don't feel that way lately as much. So, what's acceleration? A sense, interestingly enough, is a biological system used for sensation. The process of gathering information about the world through the detection of stimuli. Now, let's just take that for a moment. And I just channeled some information this morning about the senses. So our senses are heightening. Many of us are overly sensitive to sound right now. We're feeling just sensations that we haven't really felt before. It's uncomfortable. So our extra sensory, so our regular senses are our hand, our touch, our taste, our sight, our smell, right? And our hearing. So we're gathering information about the world through the detection of stimuli. So we're gathering information by how we hear and how we process. So if the information in the world is changing, so too must we evolve in order to gather the information or understand it. And that just kind of supports my theory that we're evolving, and part of this is going to affect our inner ear crystals. Whew. And so as we do this, we're shifting and growing, so on and so forth. And how we interpret that information, how we hear it, is also shifting, because now we are perceiving things, our stimuli, differently than we did before. Some of us, not all of us. Okay, so I'm sharing screen briefly just to talk a little bit about the semicircular canals and sacs, and all vertebrates are attached to ducts. So this is all a combination of gelatinous matrix and calcium carbonate in the viscous fluid of the saccule utricle. The weight and inertia, all right, so now we're back into right, mass, weight, gravity of these small particles causes them to stimulate hair cells when the head moves. So it talks about these serves, and then it's connected to an afferent nerve. Hair cells send signals down sensory nerve fibers, which are interpreted by the brain as motion. In addition to sensing acceleration of the head, the otoliths can help to sense the orientation via gravity's effect on them. Whew. So when the head is tilted, the pull of gravity on otoliths shifts the hair processes to the side, distorting them and sending a message to the central nervous system that the head is tilted. So if this is distorted, our orientation is going to be off. Now, I see this as so symbolic. It's like doing a card pull. I don't need to do a card pull. I have vertigo. So there's something going on with the crystals in my ears. So scientifically, I've got to get that fixed. I've got to figure it out. But from an esoteric standpoint, or from a everything is connected standpoint, if I were going to pull a card and say, what does this mean? All I have to do is look it up. So fun. I'm using my environment, my body, to give me an energetic reading on what's happening in the collective, as well as what's happening for me. So my orientation is off. I'm not really sure where I am. I'm not sure where I'm going, or it's this reorientation that many of us in the collective are going through. So now I'm giving a collective reading here energetically. And it's good to be aware of this. This is affecting clearly the central nervous system. And I want to go here talking about mice. In mice, sensation, this is really important. So let's talk a little bit about cymatics and sound. So from a esoteric perspective, or not even that, let's just I'm just going to mush it all together. There are sounds going on around us all of the time. There are vibrations going on. I've been told that the earth makes, and this is not just me, the earth does make a low hum. Where do we think Om came from in the yogis? Om, Om. So when we make these sounds or communication in our body, it creates a vibration. It creates a rattle, if you want to call it that. But that vibration creates a sound, or the sound creates a vibration, and that creates a shape, a structure, a movement, a wave. So if we want to say we have sensory overload, then it would make sense that certain music that isn't in resonance with our body is going to increase that feeling of anxiety, potentially, that sensitive on the ears. Think about people who have autism, that ear sensitivity. They're tuning into something in a much stronger way than we are, potentially. If someone is blind, their ears are more sensitively tuned to the sound because they've worked that muscle more. So what happens is, many of us, from my perspective, are turning that on. This is being enhanced within us, so we can hear with ears to hear, as it says in the Bible. So again, as within, so without. So it says in the Bible, and I'm just quoting the Bible because it's a very perfect quotes to share what's going on in our bodies, but also what's going on in the earth. So the earth makes this om, this vibration and this sound, and when we get in tune with it, the Schumann resonance has a certain frequency or vibration. That's something else I really didn't cover. I should cover that briefly. The Schumann resonance, if you guys have checked that out, it's kind of the talk of the town. Like, oh, the Schumann resonance has gone up. We're all affected by it. Well, I kind of feel like we are the Schumann resonance, but that's a whole other conversation. But as the earth shifts its vibration, and as we shift our interaction with that vibration, it creates a frequency that we're all picking up on. Our inner ears are picking up on it too. So sound is very important right now. So I guess I kind of just rolled into all of the synchronicities around this to just kind of be aware of, which I think is very fun. So there is evidence that the vestibular system of mammals has retained some of its ancestral acoustic sensitivity, and that the sensitivity is mediated by the otolithic organs. In humans, vestibular evoked myogenic potentials, I've got to look up that one, occur in response to loud, low frequency acoustic stimulation in patients with the sensorineural hearing loss. Vestibular sensitivity to ultrasonic sounds has also been hypothesized to be involved in the perception of speech presented at artificially high frequencies above the range of the human cochlea, and it gives the hertz of that range. In mice, sensation of acoustic information via the vestibular system has been demonstrated to have a behaviorally relevant response to the acoustic in the presence of loud, low frequency sounds that are below the threshold of their cochlea, raising the possibility that the acoustic sensitivity of the vestibular system may extend the hearing range of small mammals. Now, what if our ears are what if we're going through evolution and our ears are actually evolving and we are increasing our hearing range, or hearing the sound, as I like to refer to as the sound behind the sound? Now, I'm bringing this whole paragraph up because there is something, I'm going to go a little, we could call it conspiracy theory here. There is an idea that there is a sound that is all around us, whether it's ultrasound or acoustic, that is kind of being pumped into it. Our radio is, a lot of the music is coming out at a very incoherent bass, even though it sounds fine. There's a kind of a fingers on the chalkboard that we don't notice that's there, that's present. Now, if we have enough stimulation going on around us between electronics, ultrasound, radio waves, we could say 5G, all of that combined, we're in a soup of acoustic vibration or constant stimulation, Bluetooth, all of it, that is essentially affecting our sound. And if there is something potentially that happens inside the inner earth, whether it's through the crystals in the earth, organic or inorganic, whatever that might be, fill in the blanks, we're picking up on that. And for some of us who may be a little more sensitive to it, it can create feelings of imbalance, dizziness, and we're not able to orient ourselves. Think about all of the whales that have beached themselves. They are feeling this. They're not able to orient themselves. And I know that some animals are, they respond to radar. They use radar or sonar, excuse me. But we're using our senses, so we're all connected to this. So there is technology that we may not even understand or know about that is being utilized that can sometimes put us in a place of imbalance. So being aware of that, we may need to really shut everything off and shut everything down, just like I suggested with the caffeine or alcohol. We may need to shut it off so we can balance out our system a little bit. And also it could have to do with where we live. So sometimes our location is affecting how our body is responding to, we're responding to our environment. And that's just something to be aware of. It's a thing. I'm going to go back to this and just highlight this for a moment. So we talked about vestibular sensitivity to ultrasonic sounds. Okay. So sound with frequencies greater than 20 kilohertz. So that's a lot. Okay. We may not be able to hear it, right? But we might be sensitive to it. And it has to do with the perception of speech presented at artificially high frequencies. But then the next sentence talks about mice have demonstrated an effect to response to acoustic startle reflex. So this says in animals, including humans, so it's not just mice, the startle response is a largely unconscious defensive response to sudden or threatening stimuli, such as sudden noise or sharp movement, and is associated with negative effect. Now, I find that extremely important right now. And the reason I find that extremely important is we're in a space of, we've got all this sound, we've got all this stimulation, and we've got heightened anxiety, heightened depression, heightened inability to focus, heightened noise sensitivity. What's going on? So we don't necessarily have the power. And I say that meaning on an individual basis, like right now, I can't go and turn off whatever that device is that's making that sound. And I'm not here to point fingers and say it's nefarious or on purpose, because there's a lot of technology that's around us that is meant to be positive, but potentially is having a negative impact on us. And if we're feeling this, what are the animals feeling? What is the earth feeling? So moving forward in the next generation that we are co-creating together, I'm just going to go there for a minute, we won't be utilizing that as much. We're going to be finding a better state of resonance. In the meantime, we're having growing pains to try to evolve in order to, I'm hearing accommodate the acoustics. And when I say that, I'm hearing echo, accommodate, play with this. The echo, the sonar, we are in the process of stabilizing our own frequency so we can handle it a little bit better. But it takes time for this to happen. And again, I'm not here to point fingers, but it's a thing, just to be aware of it. All we can do is balance our own field, our own energy. And it's just going to take a little bit more work in some cases. Okay. So now we're talking about what these bones are made out of, and it's calcium carbonate. And I wanted to go into this briefly because there was a lot of synchronicities for me here. Now, I've already recorded this once, and the reason I didn't post it is because I used some names of some companies where I was talking about the sound and also some foods and things that may not be very healthy. And I have been warned on this channel before when I do that, so I'm just trying to be very, careful about the censorship. So I had to re-record the whole thing. So if I seem a little bit loopy when I'm explaining this, I was really happy with that recording too. But it has affected how many people view these videos. It is what it is. So I will say one thing before I forget, MSG, be aware, and I'm going to probably do a separate video on this. I won't name the companies that use it. You would be surprised at some of the foods that actually use MSG, and you might be surprised at some of the ingredients that could affect that high sodium content. So that's just to be something really aware of, because I went in, I just saw sodium bicarbonate. So we're going to talk a little about carbon, because a lot of us have heard that are in the spiritual community, especially, that our bodies are shifting to a more crystalline, meaning like a more liquid crystal form, going from a very carbon-based to a more crystalline. Well, what does that mean and what does it look like? And I was shown as I was doing the video yesterday, I'll try to find snippets and kind of add that in, because I can't remember what I said. I was in flow. That the structure is shifting, it's changing. So our bodies are essentially working through these growing pains. So I'll take us into that and share screen. So the calcium carbonate looks like this, which I think is really cool. This is the crystal structure of calcium carbonate. This is what is in our inner ears. These little crystals look like. So notice it's got, there's space. It's so fascinating. I just love the human body. And this is shifting potentially, or evolving, we could say, into something different, just like quartz changes, and quartz can change its or evolve its crystalline structure. I don't know enough about crystals, but there's many different shapes of crystals. And so I will go back and maybe do a little bit more on this and maybe channel some information. But let's see where we're called to go. I will say that what I have to share about this is intuitive. And what I intuitively see, I was shown that the earth is shaking and moving. So what happens is this, the earth is shaking and moving, and these crystals get moved around. What I was shown was the volcanic activity, as well as the earthquakes, move some of these crystals and relocate them. Now think about what a crystal does in a watch. The quartz in our watch, ironically, powers our ability to perceive time. So maybe we'll move into that. It powers our ability to charge our watches, right? It keeps it in time. So similarly, the crystals in our ears are kind of like right? They give us an idea of in space where we are, our linear acceleration, how fast we're moving, okay? Where we're moving. And in addition to that, what I was shown is, because of these volcanoes and earthquakes, and this is my own intuitive visualization, as these move, well, as they vibrate, they send out a sound. They send out a signal like the quartz crystals do, and they send out a charge. So it's electrically stimulating. It stimulates a particular shape or resonance in the field that is a wave. Okay, so sorry, I got a little distracted. But so the crystals in the earth are what I've been shown is redistributing, and that changes the sound. It changes where some of the orientation. And what's interesting is, if our orientation is shifting and the earth's orientation is shifting, and I don't know, I'm just sharing what's synchronistic for me, there's definitely something to it. And potentially this is happening to counter a lot of the non-organic things that are all around us, right? Also, I kind of thought it was fun, the synchronicity and symbolism between calcification and pH balance. So I didn't really talk about this before, but it's really important for our body to be alkaline. So we don't just have these crystals in our inner ears, we also have the pineal gland. And many of us have heard about the pineal gland calcifying, and if it calcifies, it closes off our intuition. It can be decalcified, and I'm not really sure that it completely can. I guess it can calcify. I've seen pictures of it. But I wanted to share kind of a synchronistic combination of calcium carbonate. So we have these crystals in our ears. And if we look here in the oil industry, calcium carbonate, the same stuff that makes up the crystals in our ears, is added to drilling fluids as a formation bridging and filter cake sealing agent. It is also a weighting material, which increases the density of drilling fluids to control the downhill pressure. I just love that. That has to do with gravity, right? Well, I mean, to play with. And it's also added as a pH corrector for maintaining alkalinity and offsetting the acidic properties of the disinfectant agent in swimming pools. Now, we know how important it is for our bodies to be alkaline. It's just ironic that we have this calcium carbonate, and it's just talking about how it just reminds me of how important it is to be alkaline and to be pH balanced. This can actually help us to maintain our balance, our acidity in our body. And what did I say earlier? What actually creates acidity in the body are foods and things such as salt, caffeine, and alcohol. Not necessarily salt quite as much, but definitely caffeine and alcohol. Whew. Okay, there's so many more places I could go with this. I know I'm running out of time. But speaking of, let's talk briefly about time. So, time and orientation. So we're just going to talk a little bit about orientation first. We'll end on time. And if I have time, I'll do another channeling, and then we'll go from there. So this is the last little bit. If you've made it this far, congratulations. So this is a neuroscientifically challenged website, which I find myself neuroscientifically challenged. And see if I can make this bigger. It's already as big as I can get it. So I just thought this was so fascinating, and I encourage you to read it if you want. So we've already discovered, right, that the vestibular system is responsible for providing our brain with information about motion, head position, and spatial orientation. And you can go on YouTube and look up this 2-minute neuroscience vestibular system, which is just fascinating. I haven't watched it yet, but I just think this whole subject is